So, hello and welcome to this tutorial of the pixel fire you can see here right now. Let me quickly change the view to the Blender window. Pretty familiar. Alright, so let's, I would say, just start by deleting everything as always. So let me quickly look here. Alright, then let's just start by using some geometry, or just delete the default cube and add it again. So let's open the geometry nodes editor here and just start right away. So here it really doesn't matter which, or the group input doesn't matter. We will replace it with a grid, because what we will do now is we will create this grid here, and then we will spawn on this grid many instances here, which are grids as well, or let's say just little planes, which will then move upwards here. And because of that, we will just use a grid and then spawn little grids on that. So this will be our main grid here, where everything will take place. All right. 1 second. Okay. So like this. And now I want to add something to that. But at first I want to edit this grid here. Let me quickly enable the wireframe that you can see the geometry on it. And I want to be able to change the resolution and size of this grid, because maybe we want to adjust our flame, of course. And to do that, I want to, of course, need something for the value, which will be an integer, like this. And I want to put this in the size X, come on, like this, which is then, you can change it now step by step. And I want to increase the vertex count, of course, connected to that integer. And I will do that with a math node, and I want to add 1 to this value. So let me quickly do this here, and I want to put that on here, because of course you need 1 vertex more than you need the size here, because let's see here, when I increase this value, for example, let's say I have an integer of 4, which means this is 4 units wide, but I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 vertices here. And that's why we need 1 more vertex than we have in width here. All right, the same thing we'll do for the bottom part here, but here I can already tell you I want to use 8 here, for example, a bit higher than the other value. So let me just copy that. And then I want to put that into the Y slots here. So let's put that on here. And then I want to add that to on here. So let's tidy that up a bit, because they cross here the lines. It's maybe a bit untidy, but you can just do something like that, for example. And then it's a bit more tidy. So like this. Okay, and now you have here your grid, which you can adjust in length on both sides, and automatically it will adjust the geometry to it. And that's the base of our fire here. Okay, so far, let's make this a bit smaller here. All right, so now we have this grid, and now we want to instance something there, of course. So let's use the instances on points here. Then instance another grid, like this. And then I want to rotate this by 90. And now you can see, and of course I want to reduce the vertex count here. So now you can see that I have just created some rows here, or rows, 5, yeah, oh no, 6. Yeah, 6 rows here, and they all contain just some grids here. So let's continue. By the way, in theory, you could use cubes here as well. Then you have a real 3-dimensional fire. So the fire then is like a voxel fire with cubes rising here. It depends on what you want to do. I personally find the grids a bit better because then you don't have, you can't see the depth then of the cubes, but you could make a voxel version of that with cubes. All right, so then let's make the movement, which is the main part, of course, because it's a fire and fire should move. So let's continue with a translate instances. So because, of course, in general, we want to translate them. So we want to move them upwards. And to do that, we need, of course, some math here. And I want to start with, let's say, so let me just add that. So I want to start, of course, with the index here of these instances, because, of course, it should be random. If it's not randomized, then it looks, not really like a fire, because you see, if I don't randomize them, they just move here up and down and so on. So everything at once, which we don't want. So let's use the index of them, then use a random value. If we plug that in the ID here, then their index will change. Because if you change the index here, you can redistribute the indices here. If we change that to integer and put this from min 0 to max 10, then, or let's say 8 or something, so then these indices here are randomized from a range from 0 to 8. And now we can work with it, because we can, for example, now, multiply that value with, another random value, and then change the movement of that and randomize them. All right. So let me quickly do that here like this. So let's add a math multiply here and put that over here. And here I can now, as you can see, wait a second, let me use a combine XYZ here. And let me disable that, because we don't want to use the local space here. I need the global, because here it's easier, because Z is just upwards and fire moves upwards here. So use that here. And now you can see when I increase, because I just multiply a value here, if I increase now the index number, or every instance here has its own index, and I multiply its own index with its position here, and then it moves upwards. And because I'm doing this only on the z-axis, and because of that it moves upwards. So you can now tell, for example, these instances here have the 0 index because they don't move at all. And you could prevent that, for example, by just changing the range from 1 to 8, because then they will have at least 1 and will always move. It depends on what you want to do. In here, it doesn't matter for me, but in theory, you could just give everything a value above 0, and then it will be fine. So I build it like that. You can do it in your way, of course, or you could, of course, bring them closer together, for example, from 7 to 8, and then you can see they are way closer here, because, of course, the range between them is not very large. If you increase the variation here in numbers from the indices, then, of course, the distance will increase here, because here you have low values and here you have high values. Okay, so let's continue here. Multiply that. And then I want to add something in between here. Like this. Because here I can just put something like hashtag frame divided by 20. And then this will rise like this. Yeah, because this number here now counts the frame divided by 20, which means a value of 20 is then a value of 1 here. You can see that here too. Let me check something. Okay. So now we have this animation, and this can just run along here. All right. And now comes the pixel part, because of course this is a pixel tutorial, and here comes the trick for the pixel art, and it's very usable or useful for many pixel animations, because of course we want to move, or we want, yeah, that these grids here, or these planes, of course move pixel by pixel here, because of course this is not very pixel-like. Of course, yeah, because they're not limited to these steps here. And we can do this with another calculation. So add another math node here, which is the seal, the ceiling. And you can now see here the smallest integer greater than or equal a, which means if your index has a value of 1.1, then it is 2, basically. Until it hits something over 2. Then it will be 3, and so on. So which means they stay a long time at these whole numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. When you now look at this, this is what happens. So you basically move them only by 1 units. As long as they're below 1, they will be a 1. And as long as they're below 2, they will be a 2. So between 1 and 2, they will be a 2, and so on. So you can just move them now on a grid, basically, because they are, yeah, so small, and they have the exact length of these little changes here. So they have a length of 1, and they move by 1 step, so by 1 unit, and by that they will just move on this grid here, and this is fine. And then this is basically the pixel movement here. And now we'll only adjust the shape of the flame here, because you can already see this is a bit too uniform maybe. And yeah, so we will change this a little bit. So we will put now something before the seal here. We will do a modulo operation, one of my favorite mathematical operations. And with a modulo, you basically, in animation, you repeat patterns with this, because a modulo just calculates the remainder of a division. So I already explained that in another video. I don't remember in which one, maybe in the dot shader tutorial. If you have a range of values from 0 to, let's say, 10, and you just have a linear increase here like this, then it will be at 5, it will have the value of 5, of course. 5. But with a modulo operation, when you divide that, so let me quickly show that to you, 1 or 0 and 10, with a modulo operation, if I calculate a range of values with a modulo operation, for example, a modulo of 2, then the remainder of a division by 2 will be the outcome, will be the result, which means, let's say here is 2, this looks like this then, because of course if you divide 2 by 2, you don't have a remainder. It's a complete division without remainder, and then the value becomes 0 again. So the result is not the result of the division, but the remainder of the division. And of course the remainder increases, and when it hits the integer number here, the modulo number, then it will be 0. And then it will just repeat this pattern. And by this you can create repeating patterns in, I don't know, yeah, basically everything. in game design, you can calculate item collections or collectibles, for example. Yeah, Super Mario, maybe you know that. If you collect 100 numbers, your life will increase by 1. You get a 1-up, which is basically 0, 100. And this is basically just a modulo. If you hit the coin count with a modulo 100, is then this calculation, and then this goes on, and this is then 200. And every time you hit this border, you gain a life. But that's maybe another topic. Let's stay with the pixel art. Just for information, modulo is very often used in game design and animation to create repeating mathematical patterns. Okay, so let's just make a modulo operation with a random value. Because, let's put this over here, I choose something like this, 8 and 12. Because, as you can already see now, something is happening here now. Maybe let's increase this to 5,000. 5,000. So, you can see here now that this is just repeating itself. And that's because these indices here, or these instances, have a different modulo factor here, which means they start, so they oh, hello Lego. Yeah, I find this cool as well. I love pixel art in Blender and CGI because it's very cool to calculate all of that. So you basically have different repeating patterns. Some of them have a modulo of 8, and some of them have a modulo of 12, and of course in between them too, which means they are randomly repeating their upwards motion. So some of them are fast and some of them are slow, which means not fast or slow, but some of them start to reappear faster. So for example, some of them have here their looping spot like this, and some of them have their looping spot here. For example, you can see this on that one, that's higher. And by this you have a random flame animation, I would say. So pixel art flame. It's pixel art flame enough for me. So that's why I do this that way. It's not very hard. It's pretty easy to calculate. Just one modulo operation basically, and then seal the numbers to the whole unit values, and then you have already this flame animation. And then you may recognize here that you have a block here, so something like a square, which is not that flame looking. I will deal with this now, but yeah, for now, or if this is enough for you and it's not too blocky, then you can of course just leave it like that. But I tried to create the flame shape here, which is something like this. So I just want to cut these edges. Oh, wait a second. I have to, because of this frames here. So I want to cut the flames here that you have a pointy tip and not a block. And I can do this by, pretty easy actually. I did that a couple of times on my videos too. So I basically just create a controller here with a radius. And of course the radius, okay, let me redraw that. So the radius looks like that, for example. So a circle here, this should be a circle. And then you can see that here you have areas where they are outside of the range. And I just use that to cut them off. So I basically multiply here a value with the distance. I can just do this right now to show you that. But to be able to do that, I need an information here from this grid here, which is the position of these points here before I move them, basically when they are here. Here. So I need this information here because how advanced is this? It depends. So it's a bit advanced. So you have to calculate a bit. But of course, you can just keep it simple. So the thing is about this pixel art, And the reason why I wanted to do a live stream on it, because you can make it more and more complex. For example, you could just, you could, for example, just do it like this already. You just add a material here. Fire. Let's go to Eevee for now. Like this, and then you just do something like this and already have something. So maybe enable bloom or something. Yeah, so why it's not glowing the way I want it to glow. Let's put this away for a second. So you could, in theory, just add, for example, 2 colors. You have a brighter color here and a more reddish color here. And then this is already a flame too, yeah? So it depends on what you want to do or how complicated you want it to be. Yeah, so you can just, I will do this now too. So I will start simple and just add more and more things to it. So I will add just more branches here to this tree until I can't read it anymore. No, yeah, until I'm happy with it and it's complex enough for me. So I will just add some branches here. I will change the shape and I will add this glow around. Yeah, you may saw that here. Let me quickly show you that. So you can see here that I will add the color change, that you have a white or you have a yellow bottom area and a more reddish or orange flame then in this ring around it of fire and glow and so on. So I will add some things to it. But of course you can keep it simple. I will leave this live stream as a video then, which will be 2 hours or 1 hour, I don't know. Yeah, but I will keep it online, I think. Yeah. Okay, so let's continue. Where was I? Okay, yeah, so I added now these random values here. Okay. All right. Okay, so let me quickly turn back. So capture attribute. I want to capture here now something, because I can tell you why I want to capture it here. If I now add a controller here, which calculates the distance here, because I lied to you a little bit. In real life, this distance is something like this here. So this is about the size of the controller object. Maybe this size here. But it's basically only for the bottom line here, for this one. The further away an instance is here, the slower it will rise, basically, or the earlier it will start to disappear and so on, which means here the distance is 0, which means this will rise pretty far. This is a bit lower, and this is a bit lower, and this is a bit lower, and this is a bit lower, because the distance here increases, which means if you look at that from both sides, you will have something like a flame shape now, which is a triangle basically, but it will be randomized a bit. But in general, you will have a tip here and then slopes on the sides, and then it will look a bit more like a fire and not like a block. Okay, so let's let me quickly go back over here. So I want to capture now the attribute as long as it's on the ground, which is their position here, and I want to read the vector data, like this, and now I can capture here this vector data before I move them. This capture attribute, you use that to capture some attributes, for example, the vector, before you move them, because you can imagine if you have here a point and you want to read its position here, but somewhere at the end you move it, like I do it here, then you will read this new position. And so you have to read it before you move it, and that's where you use the capture attribute. You capture it before I move it here. Here I move it, translate, and here it's too late to read it, which means I want to read it here before I move it. Okay, that's what the capture attribute is for. I basically read old data if you want to frame it like that. Here it's newer and here it's older. Okay, so then I want to read it here. And I want to calculate that here. So for now, let's just create the controller object, which is just an empty, like always. Controller flame. Okay. And then I just drag that over here. Let me quickly show in my notice here. And I want to put that before the seal, of course. So I use a math multiply. And yeah, Lego. Yeah, start learning right now. Yeah, so it's never too late to learn. It's always a great time to learn Blender, and it's always wrong to close the Blender software. It's always the wrong move, I can tell you. I have this now, and now I want to calculate the distance, which is a vector math, because you need a vector math to calculate distances. Here. So, and here I want to calculate the distance from the former vectors and my controller object, which is here. And now I want to remap that with a map range, because of course here in this case, this is a low value and this is a high value because the distance is pretty low here. So I want to remap that. And the value is of course this one here. And I want to remap this now. But I need another value for that because maybe you remember that my grid here is variable. Which means I can change the grid, is this that one? Yeah, so I can change the grid size, which means I can't use a fixed circle here. I have to use a circle where the radius is variable as well, because the radius should be this here always, the whole object. The controller object basically only defines the center of this influence circle. I can show you in 1 minute when it's when I build it, because you can make it without a controller object too, but with the controller object you can change the center of the flame. For example, with the controller object you can make a flame which looks like that as well, if you have the controller here, that it's like this. But I can show you that in a second. Which means, which means I want to use the width here, of course, to from min in here. Do it like this. So that's a bit more tidy. So like that. So let's use the width, the variable width here as well, and then I want to remap it from min to 0 because I want to invert the values. High distance should have a low value. That's why I revert it from min to max. But if you basically type in a 0, so a lower number in the max than the min, then you will invert the effect. And I want to change this to, let's say, 2.610. So that's which value I chose. And then I want to multiply that with this value, and this is what you get here. So in here you can see what's happening now. You can see now that if indices which are close to the former position of themselves, so basically this one here will have a high height, and yeah, indices which are further away have a lower value, and they look like this. And that's why I did that, because now you can basically choose where the center of your flame is, because maybe your scene is something like that, that here is that you have a house burning or a roof or whatever, and then you can just adjust the flame shape basically. Okay, so that's why I did it with a controller. Yeah, map range is a bit tricky sometimes. That's correct. Sometimes I have to do it 3 times as well. That's correct. I struggle with that as well. And you can see maybe that this distance is not only on one axis, but on multiple axes. Yeah, you can do that as well here. Maybe you can see that you have a ramp here as well. But because we're doing pixel art and this is 2-dimensional anyway, it doesn't matter. Yeah, so you can just ignore the depth basically. And you can maybe see how this works now because you have multiple layers here. This looks, of course, more randomized than one layer. Yeah, because you have different layers of of pixels. Okay. So let's continue. I have to hit one of these. All right, now we got that. And of course, then we can just decrease the scale here. So I put it on 8 for my campfire there, which is something like that. And of course, you can move it away. So your reference area is this first row here, which means if you distance the controller object, you can just lift a little bit. If you want to have a small flame like this, you can just put it a bit here or in the proximity here. And if you want to have a large frame or flame, you put it directly in the row because then the distance is pretty low and this results in high values. Okay, in a high multiplication factor here of the movement. Okay. Let's just keep it like that. Or maybe put it over here or something. All right. So far for the flame animation itself, basically. So yeah, this is the basic flame animation here. Okay, let me now, because I want to do it chronically, so that you can build a simple version and then make it more complicated. Because of that, I now want to jump to the material, because now you have the flame animation. If this is enough for you, then you can just leave it like that, of course. By the way, if you want to reduce the layers, that's why we build it that way. The Y direction is, of course, the amount of layers here. You can see that. This is 1 layer, or basically 2, sorry. 1 layer, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Chronically. Yeah, something with time, I think, is the correct term. And you can now increase the density here of your flame because you just add more and more layers to it. If you put a very high value, you have something like this. Yeah, which looks like that because our controller, of course, is a sphere here. But if you keep it, I don't know, beyond or below 15, then you can just keep it like that. But in my case, 5 is enough because you have some issues too if you have it too high, because you at some point they will just cover other indices behind them or planes, which means you won't see more anyway, because it doesn't matter if here is 1 or 10, because I mean you can already see there are 2 now at the same position and you don't see them anyway. So it really doesn't matter to have 2 high values here. Okay, let's continue with the material. For the material, I already created something here. Let's add another window like this. I already have something here to work with. And here I want to add now an attribute, which is also the distance here, which means you have another controller. So we have 2 controllers in the scene. Yeah, little pixel campfire and 2 controllers. Yeah, because I want to add some complexity, which means you can create the gradient of your colors. So let's add another empty object, or just copy that one. controller. Oh no, we can use the same actually. For the shine we need a different one. So we can leave it like that. Because we can now use this controller here for the proximity of the material. Which means we have a high core or a bright and yellow core and a more reddish distance material. So let's, where is my tree here? Here. I think I want to do that before the material here. So here I want to capture now the, their distance again. Maybe I don't need that, but I did it like that. I just capture their vector points. Yeah, I'm basically creating a gradient in a circular way. So basically a sphere. but of course in pixel art, you don't really see the gradient. You see a pixel gradient. There are pixels of different colors from yellow to red. So maybe 3 different colors or 4. And here I want to calculate again. Oops. Like this, the distance with, again, the controller flame. Oh, by the way, I think I want to change this to relative on both of these. And now calculate the distance from their positions and the controller object, and then export that as an attribute. Let's quickly rename that. Here. Flame. Flame color. But that's not very important. It's only for the name of the slot. Here is the attribute. And I can call that flame, for example, or fire. It's just that I can reuse that again. Or find that again. And if I use this now here, attribute, and I use the fire attribute for the gradient, nothing will happen because we have to remap it, of course, as always. Map range. No good tree without remapping everything. So I want to map them. And I just looking at my values, which I figured. Something like this. And I want to use stepped linear for that. And let's quickly look in my fader. Using the correct one. Yeah, let's see what's the problem. Something. Oh, that's the problem. Sorry. That's how I did it in my notes. And it's still black. That's not good. Usually I should see something here. Oh, whoa, I did something wrong here. Instance. I want to use the instance here. Something I did wrong. Oh, I think I know. Ha. Okay. Classical error. Realize instances. If you want to read them as individual yeah, instances or objects and with its own positions and so on. Yeah, because if you don't realize them, they will not be read as individual things. Okay, problem solved, no problem. All right. So now we have this gradient here, and you can let me find that here, and you can now remap them, and you can see maybe here. You can see that this gradient is now has this circle around it basically, which we want to have at somewhere here. And then you have this core flame with the distant flame here. And let's quickly change that here because we want to remap this, of course. Because we want to use, of course, our own colors for that. So we use a color ramp here and just create a constant change and add 3 colors. And for example, I have something like, and of course I want to put this in the emission like this. And I want to have here something like bright yellow. Something like that. Here I want to have a medium orange color. No, something like this. And here I want to have a darker red. So that's how I did it. And then you have something like this. And then you can again add more complexity to it as always. Let me quickly see that the transparency is enabled. No, it's not. So let's add transparency to it because you can make this parts here more transparent as they travel away from the center. And we can do this because if you look at this, this is how it looks here, this attribute, and we can add another color ramp here and connect that to the alpha, which is then this, and we can just invert that here. And we don't want to have a 0 value here, but maybe a bit transparent here, and then another slider. And you can basically choose how transparent are the parts of the flames. And for example, you can have now transparent pixels here, like this. And then you can, of course, choose how transparent you want it to be. For example, like this, that it fades out a bit at the top. Yeah, and then you can have, so you can reuse basically the same attribute for multiple things, color and alpha and so on. And since we have it, we can of course use it for many things here. Okay. So far for the things here. If you want, you can add a hue saturation value node here because I increased the value a bit to make it more shiny, because with a high value you can add you can increase basically the bloom here. Yeah, for example like this. Then the bloom will or can read more high values there and will then be able to create more bloom effects on these areas, for example. Yeah, so, but yeah, I now overshoot it a bit. Something like this, for example, and then you can see it. And by the way, it will of course cast then more light to things in the near as well. So if I add a ground now, you can see you have a realistic ground lighting because basically these are only illuminated plates or planes. And if you increase this value here, the light will of course be stronger in the on proximity objects too. So let's go back to Eevee. Okay, so but this is how it's looking now. It's a bit strong. Okay, so let's go back to 2 or something, and then you can have your pixels illuminated. So this is the material, basically. It's not getting more complicated. It's only reading the fire attribute, remapping color and alpha and so on, and then go to the emission and you're finished. Okay, so we can now close this, and now we'll only work on another part of geometry. Maybe on the shine, another material, but if you're happy with this simple flame, yeah, it can be used on many scenarios. Yeah, that's why I chose it, because who doesn't need pixel fire? Yeah, it's it's very common that you have burning things in pixel art. Okay, so let's jump back. Let's quickly see where I am. By proximity. Okay, so the base color, the base flame is now finished at this point, and now we want to add one more thing, which will be a medium large block of the shine around it, because maybe, oops, here around it, maybe you want to see that again, or let me quickly show you that again. You have, or I mean, if you want to have it, you can have a shine around, oops, around the flame. So that you can, and by the way, as well, you can have an area which is not completely transparent, but it's a bit, it has a bit color around or inside of that shine rim here. Now my voice cracks. Okay, so let's continue with that. For that, we just need another piece of geometry, which means we're finished with this one. And we will just add a join, a join geometry node here. And then we will add something here and connect that here, and this will be the shine. So let's move this a bit back here, and then we will just work over here now. And then it's finished. All right, so let's start with with another grid here. So let's use a grid. Connect that over here. Like this, and then we want to rotate that, transform geometry, and rotate that on the x-axis by 90, and then you want to make that large. So for example, 20 by 20 pixels, and 21 by 21 vertices, because we need one vertex more than width here. And then we want to move that, for example, upwards by 8, and to the side by 3, that we can now spawn on these positions, because every crossing here is a point. If we now place an instance here, it will look exactly like this and align. It will align with everything else here. So the shine will align with the flame. So this works like that. And then, of course, we want to instance it directly. So we can move that all the way here. Instances on points, like that. And then we want to use another grid, of course, which you want to transform as well. Like this, but of course this grid should be 1 by 1. And then instance that here and return that here as well. So that looks very fine. 2 by 2, like this. Okay. And now we have this grid now, which is in the back here, which is all right. And yeah, that it's not in the way of something. And here we will then just basically delete some of these planes here, or grids, to have only this ring around it, always with circles. Yeah, it's the easiest thing to work with proximity areas, circles, and spheres and so on, because you can just place a controller somewhere and everything will solve itself automatically. So if you're lazy, just work with distance and proximity areas, just like me. Okay. So this is fine. Let me quickly realize that again before I forget it again. Okay. So, and now we'll just create an attribute which looks like this rim here of this shine. I have to drink something. Okay. So now let me add here something, which is another controller for the shine. So now the second controller comes into play, which I promised before. Controller shine. And this will be, for example, somewhere here, that the shine will be around the controller object. And let's use that here, relative, and then use the quickly see. Okay, so then I used a geometry proximity to calculate the geometry. Ah, wait a second, let me quickly see. I think I did that in another way. Yeah, the controller shine is only 1 point. Oh yeah, okay, I know why I did that. I changed that. So I don't want to use a controller, I don't want to use an empty here, because of one reason. I can't easily rotate an empty around something, so I have to create a constraint or whatever, because the origin is always at the empty. But if I create a mesh object here, let me quickly, I don't know, do that. So, and have an object with 1 point in it. Oh, did I just delete everything? Like this. If I have now an object here with 1 point in it, I can move this point over here, for example, just a bit away from the origin, and then I can rotate this. And when I now calculate the distance from these indices, these instances, to this 1 point, I can pretty easily create a my fire is flickering and the shine is moving and rotating animation, because, of course, the distance to this little point here changes all the time, and I can just make this rotating all the way here, and then my fire will flicker a bit around, or my shine around it. That's why I changed that, and that's why I used a geometry proximity also. So let's put this over here, for example, and just place it somewhere here. Okay, I just was a bit confused by my own notes for a second, but now everything is fine. So, and this is now my controller shine. So sometimes it's yeah, better to not use a empty or an empty. Sometimes it's better to use a geometry with only one vertex in it, and then it's sometimes easier to operate it. Okay, so create here the target. Okay, this is fine. And then source position is, of course, the position of the instances. And then I calculate the wait a second. No, here I have my distance value. I want to have a random value, but let's save that for later. I want to at first finish this. here now I want to create a float curve to remap the distance here. And that I want to use now for the selection, correct. Here, my instances. I want to connect this to the selection to, yeah, basically delete or basically don't spawn some instances here. I don't want to spawn some little planes on some instances, which means only in this area should be little planes. That's what I mean. And I want to remap that, and I did that to, let me quickly look that up. Yeah, 15 on the x-axis, like this, and then I just changed that to this. And then I maybe want to readjust it a bit. Oops, a bit to operate here. Let's see, where is the issue? Oh, here's some issue. Oh, I just selected it itself. Oops, I should like flame. And this is my controller shine. Oh, I just misclicked it once before. Now it's working. Where is my gradient? Geometry, position. Why can't I see that? Now I'm confused again. Let's check that. Oops. Why is it like that? I'm trying to create now a selection basically here that I delete things which aren't that far away. Or things which are far away I want to delete. Oh, did I make... Ah, damn. Okay. Okay, of course I have to change this to points, because of course I want to select these points and not these faces. Okay. Sometimes you just overlook something. Of course you want to, yeah, create the distance to the points. Okay, problem solved. And now we have here a area where we can create the shine, for example, like this. And because, of course, this is way too radial, we just add this random value before we put this into the float curve. And we do this with a math multiply. Connect that here, and then use something from 1 to 1.3, or I did 1.3 to 1, something like that. And then you can already see, oops, that you have this random, yeah, rim here basically, or yeah, with, it's not that straight anymore. It has this little rough edges here. All right, and after we did that, and now here comes the trick to make this look like a ring here of fire. I just simply animated the seed, because you can see when I do this, this could be the pixel rim of a fire shining. And so I just put in here hashtag frame divided by 10. And now this is my animated fire rim. Pretty simple. So I love to be lazy as everyone. And then it looks like that. And if I now decrease, of course, my FPS to something like 15, I think I used 15 for that. This could be a pixel fire with this glowing rim. And maybe I want to decrease the scale of the rim, or for example, like that. And then you have it like this. And then you're happy with this animated rim. And now we will again use an attribute to redesign the color or material of the rim. And to do that, oops, wrong here. I want to read here again an attribute of this here. So capture attribute. I want to capture the attribute here on the face this time, over here, like that, and read then this attribute as well at the end here. So export that here. Come on. I have to hit that here. Okay, and just rename that shine color, for example, and then I name this attribute here shine. And now this is my shine attribute, which looks like, where is it? Which looks like this. Yeah, this is my shine attribute. Yeah, and it will be on here. So this may be a bit hard to see, but you can see then in the shade editor, this is how the shine attribute looks like. And now you can imagine if I can create a gradient and so on like before, I can reshape it, or not reshape it, recolor it. And I will do this now. Shine color, so let's add something. Set material for the shine, and the material is here. Let me quickly see. Could copy the old one. Yeah, we can just copy that. Duplicate that. Shine. And then we'll change this here. Where is my shine? Here. So at first I want to, of course, I think you can reference an empty object with an info node and then feed the location to a mesh line. Yeah. Yeah, sure. I mean, of course you can work around it. I think you can maybe just use an empty and then just move it with a transform node and then capture the former position and then recalculate it with the current position and so on. Of course, yeah, you can do that. I just found it as the most simple solution here to just use an object for that. A mesh object with one point and just rotate it. Because you can now see when I rotate this, this will be like that. So you could just, for example, rotate it. Let me see where I put it. Here. What a frame by 5. I just can go over here on the Y. Hashtag frame divided by 5. And then it will rotate like this, for example. Or if you wanted to have it faster, divide by 2. And then it will be like this. But let's recolor it and then we can see, because of course most of it will be transparent. Okay. So let's reshape this here. I just used 2 colors, so I can delete this one and just change here the portion here to something like that. And of course here I want to change here the opacity, because let's go back here and put this to pretty transparent, something like that. Put it over here like this. And of course here we need the shine attribute. That makes more sense. So here we can define the color like this, for example, that you have a rim inside and an orange around it, and then a color ramp where you can choose the transparency. And if you want to furthermore reduce it, you can just use a math node, multiply by 0.4, and then you can, or something like this, yeah, you can basically adjust the opacity here to, if you want to make everything transparent a little bit. But in general, you can do it with this as well. And then you have something like this, which you can then adjust, of course. And then you can move the controller shine to move this ring here. And if you want, for example, to move further away, you just have to increase the grid from the start, which is this one. You have to increase the scale here, but increase in the vertices, of course, too. For me, this was enough, but if you want to go more to the right or to the left or upwards or downwards, you have to increase the original grid. For me, this was totally enough. I just want to have this little rotating ring here. And if you want to increase the rotation motion, then of course you need to go further away from the center here. But of course, this is a bit strong. So let's go slightly next to it. And then this will just move a bit while it's burning, like this. And then your pixel fire will look like that. And then of course, maybe you want to decrease the opacity here, 0.3, and then the shine, or 0.1, whatever, yeah. And you have a small shine around a bright flame, and then you can do it like that. If you want to increase the ring size here, then you can adjust the remapping float curve. You can have a small ring or a large ring, yeah, like this. And then you can have this fire here. I think that was it. If I'm not mistaken, that's it, I think. So you have your, if maybe I can sum this with some joining nodes, basically. So you have your grid fire basically here. Like this, your base fire grid. Then all of these here, all of these are for movement. So movement, fire upwards, I don't know, yeah. And these here is for the pointy center of the flame, like this. Then these are for the fire proximity, for the fire controller, so for the attribute basically. They're only for the color. So fire controller proximity, color, or the attribute which will be then used here as the color, but I think you know what I mean. And then you have all of this here is just for the shine. Yeah, so all of this is shine. And you have two different things basically. This is the grid of the shine. Can't I just add them in here? Yeah. Okay, so this is the grid. And this here is then the proximity again. Like this. proximity. And maybe you can recolor that. Like this. And that's it, I think. Of course, join geometry not. Only this, and maybe material not really either. No, that's how it is. All right, so this is, yeah, how you create this pixel art flame the way I did it. Yeah, and of course, then I did some post-processing effects, of course, compositing, RGB shift and whatever, yeah, and a bit more shine and everything, or yeah, everything like this. But this is the Blender part of it, basically, yeah, the geometry nodes part. You create a grid, then you move them upwards with the modulo and seal for making this pixel motions, and then you have controller objects and so on. Yeah, and then for the shine, you have, or I use a mesh object for the easy rotation motion here, like this. Okay, and then I'm happy. Yeah, thank you for watching. Yeah, I like to explain math and Blender things. You may notice that that I like to just talk a lot about math in geometry nodes, and that's what I do. All right. So thank you for watching. This was the Fire tutorial, Fire pixel art tutorial. Maybe so I don't know if I will make a short video on this because, yeah, I don't know. Or a long video maybe, but I now did this live stream. Maybe it's not necessary. Let's see. But in general, I saw that pixel art, yeah, the people want pixel art in Blender. I noticed that from my pixel art in 1 minute video that a lot of people wanted pixel art, so I will do pixel art. Okay, so yeah, thank you for watching. And thank you for the live audience. Thank you for coming by. And then I will see you, I think, in the next video, which I don't know what will be the topic. All right. So then the last time now. See you soon and goodbye.